Welcome to What Does It Even Do, the show where we talk about endboards, halfboards, and how to beat them. And since even I was able to make use of my own video at the last regionals where I beat a Yummy as a Mina player, today we're going to be looking at Branded Dracotail because I want to play this deck at the next regionals I go to. Dracotail can be hard to talk about in terms of endboards due to the fact that their combos are very hand dependent. Sure, they have one card combos, but this deck is best played when players account for the possibilities of their hand as a whole. So what I will do is show you probably the best possible endboard and the combo to make it. Following that, we'll deep dive into each of the interactions one by one, along with the best ways to beat them. This is the theoretical best Dracotail branded endboard. We have all three Dracotail traps set, a copy of the Fallen of the Virtuous set, Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous, and Dracotail Malulu on field to quick effect fusion summon, our Dracotail Find Mana in hand to also quick effect fusion summon, Ecclesian the Dark Dragon to banish itself and tag out for an Albaz monster or a monster that mentions it, and then finally a Secretarion Dragon to act as a floodgate, stopping our opponent's special summon, spellcaster, or dragon monster effects. Not to mention the rest of our hand being a Dracotail name, an incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous, and one piece of non-engine that our opponent has no idea about. Dracotail's endboard is heavily layered, and so it's really hard to talk about each individual thing without talking about other things as well. So the best way I decided to talk about these interactions is to group them by how similar their effects can be. And as I mentioned, these interactions are incredibly layered, so we're going to have to deep dive into some pathways as we see fit. So let's begin. We really have two main groups that I'm going to count as like the tag out / fusion group and the back row group. So let's go ahead and dive on in, starting with our back row interruptions. Dracotail Flame can target a face-up spell to negate its effects for the turn. Horn can target an attack position monster and return it to the hand. Lastly, Sting can target a monster and or a spell trap in your opponent's graveyard and banish them. Included with these effects, all three traps also have the effect to put a Dracotail card from the graveyard to the bottom of their deck and then draw a card. All three of these are very strong, but have some obvious counterplay. Flame must target the spell it wishes to negate, meaning if the targeted spell leaves the field, then it loses the target and the negate resolves without effect. This is commonly done with cards like Forbidden Droplet or Mystical Space Typhoon. Horn has to target an attack position monster, so summoning your most important monsters in defense is an easy way to avoid the problem. Sting unfortunately has no obvious counters other than moving the target to yourself before they can be banished. That said, it along with the other two Dracotail traps can all be stopped by using Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, since each of their effects include the effect to draw a card. They can also be stopped by Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, since to get that draw, they have to put back a Dracotail card into their deck from the graveyard. The other back row card is the Fallen and the Virtuous. This card has two effects and only one can be used each turn. The first is to send from the extract to the graveyard a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz for cost, then target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. The second effect is if there is an Ecclesia monster on your field or graveyard, target a monster in either graveyard and special summon it. This versatile spell sees a ton of play even outside of the Dracotail deck, so if you're not playing against it, you should still be wary. It's also the card that begins to show just how layered this endboard is. The back row is one thing, but lurking in the grave, hand, field, and extra deck are tools that can be deployed at a moment's notice. Dracotail Find Mana is one of the best cards that the deck has access to. It can quick effect during the main phase, discard itself as cost, and then fusion summon a dragon or spellcaster monster by using cards on the field and in hand. Note that it can also be done during the first turn of the game, even if they are not the turn player. Along with Find Mana, Dracotail Malulu on field can quick effect fusion summon as well, but it is limited to strictly making Dracotail monsters. Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous also shares a similar effect to quick effect fusion summon, but specifically it must make a level 8 or higher fusion monster. While Ecclesian the Dark Dragon does not fusion summon, it can banish itself, not for cost, and then summon from deck or graveyard a level 4 or lower monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz. Usually in this deck there are only 4 targets, being Cartesia, Fallen of the White Dragon, Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous, and Fallen of Albaz. Of these, and since we've already covered Cartesia, the important one to note is the original Fallen of Albaz. Fallen of Albaz, you guessed it, is another way to fusion summon. On its summon, the player can discard one card and fusion summon a monster using Albaz and monsters that their opponent controls, acting as a pseudo super polymerization. Now before we talk about those fusion monsters that the deck will be summoning, I think it's imperative that we talk about the main deck Dracotail monsters because they all share a very similar effect when used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard. All 6 Dracotail main deck monsters when sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon can set a Dracotail spell or trap card directly from their deck. However, the dragon types in particular get a bonus effect in addition to that set card. Dracotail Pan can destroy 1 monster on the field. Dracotail Urgula can destroy 1 spell trap on the field. And Dracotail Mululu can negate the effects of a face-up monster forever. And with that out of the way, I hope you like the color purple because we have a lot of it to talk about. Starting out with the Dracotail fusion monsters, we have Dracotail Arthalion. On fusion summon, Dracotail Arthalion can target cards in the graveyard and on the field up to the number of cards used in the hand for its fusion summon, and bounce those targeted cards back to the hand. Dracotail Gulamel is a little bit more complicated. It can quick effect target an opponent's card on the field as long as it is directly chained to one of your own Dracotail cards. An example, a common one you'll see is they'll activate a Dracotail trap card knowing that their opponent can't respond to it or either hoping that their opponent can't respond to it, and then Chainlink 2 would be Dracotail Gulamel to target an opponent's card and destroy it. And finally, we have Dracotail Shawless. Shawless has an ignition effect that can target 2 Dracotail cards in their graveyard and 1 card in the field as long as it is the same type of card as those 2 targeted cards, and then shuffle all 3 of them back into the deck. And lastly, all 3 of them have the same effect where if they are in the graveyard and 2 monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same exact time, they can special summon themselves back from the graveyard, but when they leave the field, they are banished instead. Since this deck plays Fallen of Albaz, there are a lot of fusion monsters to be aware of. That said, I really only want to focus on a couple of them, so you should really take some time to study up on the other ones by yourself. I think the most important one to bring up first is Albion the Branded Dragon. When it is fusion summoned, you can banish from your hand, field, or graveyard to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster. Albion the Sanctifier Dragon cannot be used as fusion material, and your opponent cannot target it with card effects. Also, during the opponent's turn, it can target 2 monsters in either graveyard and special summon 1 to one field and 1 to the other field. The dragon that devours the Dogma on special summon can shuffle back 2 cards from either graveyard or banishment. It does not target, so you can also shuffle back face down banished cards. Another important thing to note is, while there's either an Ecclesia monster on the field or in the graveyard, it gains 500 attack and it is unaffected by other cards' effects. Rinbrum the Striking Dragon can, in response to one of your opponent's extra deck monster effects, can quick effect, negate that effect, and then return 1 monster to the hand. More importantly for this deck, however, while in the graveyard during your opponent's turn, it can quick effect, target 1 Fallen of Albaz in the graveyard, and then it can banish itself and special summon that Albaz to the field. Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon can quick effect, for cost, send 1 fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz to the graveyard, and then non-target banish a monster on the field. And finally, we have Alba Lenitus the Abyss Dragon. This one is a little bit of a special case. You can fusion summon Alba Lenitus in a normal traditional way, but you can also contact fuse it. Albaz, in addition to any dragons on the field, can be sent to the graveyard to special summon the Alba Lenitus the Abyss Dragon as a contact fusion. Alba Lenitus also has this effect. It can attack monsters on the field up to the number of monsters used for its special summon. Just like Rinbrum, all of the Albaz fusions have an effect when they're in the graveyard. Alba Lenitus can search for a polymerization normal spell or a fusion normal spell and add it to the hand during the end phase. The dragon that devours the Dogma can search for a Tri-Brigade card or a Dogmatica card. In this deck, that usually just means the Fallen and the Virtuous. Albion the Sanctifiers is honestly kind of crazy, so I'm not going to even bother talking about it. If you want to know about it, you can look it up yourself. It's really weird. Very rarely ever comes up. Albion the Branded Dragon, however, has an effect while it's in the graveyard during the turn it was sent there to add or set a branded spell trap. And finally, Mirror Jade has an effect when it is sent to the graveyard. It can activate when it is sent to the graveyard to, in the end phase, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. This is an important trigger effect that must be activated when it is sent to the graveyard. If your opponent forgets to activate the effect of Mirror Jade when it is sent to the graveyard by your card effect, they cannot destroy your monsters in the end phase, because the activation has long since passed. And finally, we have 2 more fusion monsters that are very frequently used in the Branded Dracotail deck. There are a plethora of other fusion monsters that can be used, but I'm just going to talk about these 2 today. First off, as part of our Endboard piece as we saw prior, we have Secretarion Dragon. Secretarion Dragon has an effect where your opponent cannot activate the effects of special summoned dragons or spellcaster monsters, which in the mirror match can come up and be very strong. Its other effect is an ignition on field effect. It can target 1 dragon and 1 spellcaster monster in your graveyard, shuffle one of them back into the deck, and then special summon the other. And finally, we have Chaos Star Source Dragon. When it is special summoned, it can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of light and dark dragons used for its fusion summon and destroy them. Now that we know what the cards do, let's go ahead and talk about what we can do to deal with this deck. Starting out with how we interrupt Dracotail during their turn. Dracotail is usually hurt more by the typical lower impact hand traps such as Effect Veiler and Ash Blossom, rather than the big blowout ones like Mulcharmy Fuwalos and Droll Lockbird. The deck has very good lines through Mulcharmies due to not needing to summon much in the first place, along with their quick effect fusions to get around at least 1 draw. Droll on the other hand isn't too strong thanks to most of their Endboard being set directly from the deck. Hitting key effects with some of these low impact hand traps can be devastating to the Dracotail board. So let's begin by walking through one of their combos and pointing out key spots where we can interact with them. Any of these cards can get the Dracotail combo started, and each of them can in turn be hit by something that is fairly low impactful, save for maybe fine mana. That said, that is still hittable by something like a Dominus Impulse if your deck can play it. On that note, Fallen of White Dragon is also fairly hard to stop, but it isn't impossible. Using these lower impact hand traps like the Ash Blossom, the Veiler, and the Imperm on specific spots can really stop this deck in its tracks if they didn't happen to open everything that they possibly would have ever wanted. All 3 of these cards can be used on Dracotail Lucius when it is normal summoned and looking for a Dracotail monster to continue their place, usually that copy of fine mana. Dracotail Malulu isn't their best starter, but it can still be something that needs to start their plays and can be stopped by the Imperm or the Veiler. And for good measure, so can the Cartesias, which can fill a similar role, but maybe nowhere near as good as Malulu when getting into the Dracotail stuff. As for the rest of the cards, they can all be easily hit and stopped by an Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash Blossom is especially effectful against things like Rahu Dracotail and Branded Fusion, where these cards can only activate their effects once per turn, and Ash Blossom negates the effects, not the activation. If you were to, for example, Solemn Judgment a Rahu Dracotail, that negates the activation. If they happen to have 2 in hand, they could just drop the second one right after. So with the very basic beginnings of their combo, let's go ahead and get into an actual combo and show different places where we can hit it. So this combo is going to roughly show you one of the perfect Dracotail opening hands that they could potentially open up against you, and where you could in theory stop them. I say that this hand is perfect because it potentially can play through a lot of the hand traps that we've talked about, as well as others. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We can start by normal summoning that Dracotail Malulu. Normal summoning Malulu is part of the reason why they can play through a lot of these hand traps. Because Malulu has that quick effect to fusion summon, they can dodge things like that Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence. So as we go through this combo, let's keep in mind some of these hand traps as well as others. Anyway, after the normal summon of Malulu, they can go effective Fallen of the White Dragon, sending for cost and Albion the Branded Dragon to special summon itself from the hand. This already plays through some solid hand traps because having the Albion in the graveyard can set a copy of Fallen of the Virtuous in the end phase, which is just an interruption essentially for free because Albaz sends it as cost. Now let's say they happen to have a Dominus Impulse with a trap already in the graveyard just for circumstance's sake. That's probably the best way to stop this card because not only does it negate the effect to special summon, but it would also destroy that card keeping in the graveyard and not on the field to get its on-field effect to special into Ecclesia monster. Anyway, moving on, so we sent the Albion, we'll special summon the Fallen of the White. We can go effect on summon to special our copy of Ecclesia. You can do this in a number of ways. I mean, you could imperm this Fallen of the White, but I guarantee you because they have this Malulu on field, they can use it as fusion material, as well as the fact that we open the best hand ever. We have the Dracotail Fine Mana, which can also help dodge that Imperm. Continuing, we have that incredible Ecclesia special summon, and we can go ahead and use these 2 monsters to synchro summon into our copy of Ecclesia and the Dark Dragon. Ecclesia can then go ahead and banish itself to special summon a Cartesia from the deck. This, of course, can be stopped by an Ash Blossom, which honestly isn't the worst spot. Really what Cartesia is doing is help to insulate their place from hand traps. So If you open multiple hand traps, maybe this is the spot to hit the Ash Blossom on. But of course, in this case, we're going to pretend like we did not hit the Ash Blossom there. And then there's the Cartesia. From here, we can go Malulu effect to fusion summon using our Dracotail Fine Mana and probably some random Dracotail name, whatever we have in our hand. Urgula happens to be one of the better options in this case, to make a copy of Dracotail Arthalion. Arthalion or Arthalion is probably one of the better spots to try to hit an Infinite Impermanence on or an Effect Veiler. That said, now that we have that Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous, it is basically protected from those effects, which is why they try to go through that Fallen of the White line to get the Ecclesia Synchro and to get to the Cartesia on the field. If they are unable to start with the Fallen of the White getting the Ecclesia into the Cartesia, and they have an empty filled with just the Arthalion, and heck, even if they sent that Fine Mana just for good measure, so you're pretty confident they have no way to dodge an Imperm. Imperm on this Arthalion is probably one of the better spots you can hit this deck. Because of course the combo goes Dracotail Arthalion, Chainlink 1, targeting the Fine Mana, targeting the Urgula to bounce him back to the hand, Chainlink 2 Fine Mana to set, Chainlink 3 Urgula to set as well. So if this Arthalion is negated, they do still get the 2 sets, which can of course proceed their play a lot farther, but they miss out on getting that Fine Mana back to hand, which is very crucial to their plays. Of course, in this perfect scenario, we were able to send that Urgula, which can help us get the Fine Mana back, but I digress. Anyway, let's go ahead and resolve that chain. Urgula can go ahead and set a copy of Ketu Dracotail, and then the Fine Mana can also go ahead and set a copy of Dracotail Flame to our side of the field, and then Arthalion will bounce back that Urgula and that copy of Dracotail Fine Mana to our hand as well. Next up, we can go ahead and activate that Ketu Dracotail to search out a copy of Dracotail Lucius. And finally, we can go Cartesia effect to fusion summon using the Malulu and the Lucius. We can use Cartesia here because we are unafraid of Arthalion getting hit, because of course our Dracotail Arthalion is just a 3k beatstick just looking as menacing as possible, but that's all it's really doing. It has no effects on field. So the Cartesia fuses the Malulu and the Lucius into a Secretarion Dragon, and then of course on new Chainlinks we can go Lucius Chainlink 1 and Malulu Chainlink 2 to go ahead and set a copy of Dracotail Sting and a copy of Dracotail Horn. Secretarion Dragon will then go ahead and target both the Lucius and the Malulu to special summon that Malulu back to our field and put the Lucius on the bottom of the deck. And finally, our copy of Albion in the end phase will go ahead and set a copy of the Fallen of the Virtuous to our side of the field, leaving our board pretty dang powerful, if I do say so myself. And now finally, with that all out of the way, we can continue to talk about how to beat this deck. The biggest and most hard-hitting thing to this deck is Graveyard Hate. This deck requires the graveyard for so many different things. If these monsters can't be sent to the graveyard as fusion material and banished instead, for example, then they can't set their Dracotail spell traps that they need to continue to play the game. On top of that, the Fallen of the White Dragon, the Fallen and the Virtuous, and Mirrorjade the Iceblade Dragon require a card to be sent to the graveyard as cost to activate their effects. And some of the most common ways to stop these effects are things like Retaliating Sea. When your opponent activates a spell card that would special summon a monster, you can activate this card in your hand, special summon it to your side of the field, and every monster that would be sent to the graveyard is banished instead, therefore stopping these Dracotail names from being able to set a copy of Rahu, Dracotail, Ketu, or any of their traps that they might need. If you're going first, you have things like Dimensional Fissure, which is just a continuous spell that you can activate at any time, making it so that any monster that would be sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Same thing with Different Dimension Ground. It's a trap card that has a lingering effect that any monster that is sent to the graveyard is banished instead this turn. And finally, the big Mac Daddy of them all that is limited to one, we have Dimension Shifter. If your deck can play Shifter, you probably should be playing this card. It's very unfun to play against this card, but it does do a significant amount of damage to plenty of decks in the format. Not only Dracotail branded, but things like Yummy Azamina can also be hit pretty dang hard by Dimension Shifter. Now let's finally talk about the half-boards and also some reasons why these half-boards can happen. The Mulch Armies alone are really not enough to make them end on a half-board. Their boards can be hurt from having a Mulch Army in specific situations, but based on their hand, they don't really need to play that hard into these Charmies, giving only 1 to 2 draws maximum. If they're ever giving more than 2 draws, then their hand must have been the worst hand you've ever seen in their life. Aside from the Charmies, the biggest thing that can happen is they get a hand that only has 1 engine, whereas they might have a hand that's just the Branded engine, or they might have a hand that's just the Dracotail engine. These engines only have 1 singular card that bridged them. and that is Branded Fusion. Without Branded Fusion, they're basically playing two separate decks. That said, when they are playing these two separate decks, they pretty much will have everything they will ever need for that specific side. In Branded's case, they'll have maybe a Fallen of the White and a Cartesia, as well as 3 non-engine. And then on Dracotail's side, they're probably guaranteed to end on all 3 traps, as well as a fine mana in hand, and maybe even 1 to 2 bits of non-engine. Having only access to the Branded engine, something like this very well could be their end board. However, don't be fooled, this is surprisingly still a lot of interaction. First things first, Ecclesia can tag out for the copy of the Fallen and the White, which can special summon an Ecclesia, and Ecclesia contribute itself to special summon an Albaz from the deck. That whole process can be foregone if they just want to skip right to the Albaz by using the Ecclesia. By banishing the Ecclesia, they can special Albaz straight from the deck if they feel. And if they do that, they can use that incredible Ecclesia as free discard fodder. Once they use that Albaz as fusion material, they can make something like that Mirror Jade. And Mirror Jade is one of the most powerful boss monsters in the game, in my opinion, which can do some things like sending the Rinbrum or sending the Albion for cost so they can do the banishment. So we can either A, get follow-up in the form of Albion to search out a Branded Fusion, then bridge back into the Dracotail side, or B, use the Rinbrum to special summon that Fallen of the White and special summon that Ecclesia back to the field and have even more bodies for next turn. And then of course Cartesia is still on board that can do some fusion summoning as well, doing something like fusing itself with that Fallen of the White to make a copy of Secretarion Dragon. Secretarion, of course, being a floodgate and also potential follow-up for next turn by shuffling one back and special summoning one to the board. Last but not least, they also have that Fallen of the Virtuous, which can activate and send more follow-up to the graveyard, like an Alba Letitus to search for a Branded Fusion, and then pop a card in the field. And finally, all the non-engine left in their hand that was breaking up them to begin with. One final thing to note is that this deck does play 3 main deck traps. That non-engine could just be the Dracotail traps that they have set, which can also be used as interruption. They don't have to shuffle back a Dracotail card, they can just be used as their normal interruption, which can be very, very good. And if they only open Dracotail, it's no stretch of the imagination to assume that they could end on a board like this, with like an SP Little Knight for banishment. They have the Dracotail Gulamel already on the board because they were never locked out of it from the Fallen and the White Dragon. All 3 Dracotail traps set, on top of some non-engine that they were probably bricking on as well. And finally, before ending, I want to talk about how good this deck is at going second. Don't assume that because you won the die roll that you're guaranteed to win the match, because Dracotail can probably play into your board if not start playing on your turn because of things like Fine Mana. With Fine Mana, as well as some of the most powerful spell cards in the game, Dracotail has really no problem pushing through most boards. With that in mind, if they don't even open the Rahu or the Keto Dracotail, they can use that Fine Mana to get it by discarding it to Fusion Summon and sending some Dracotail names to set these cards for their next turn. In my opinion, Ketu Dracotail is probably one of the best designed going first and second cards in recent memory. I love that it can be activated turn 1 to just do a Rhoda effect, but on turn 2, when you're going second and your opponent has monsters, you can add 1 card to your hand and then Fusion Summon if you feel like. Very, very well designed card, and honestly, I'm kind of sad it went to 1. It should have been something like the Rahu that went to 1 rather. But that's besides the point. I just want to get the point across that these cards are so good going second. And on top of that, they're also playing a lot of non-engine like Forbidden Droplet, which helps push these cards even farther. And then the pseudo non-engine for the Fallen and the Virtuous, which definitely acts as non-engine, but of course in this deck they get to use it as part of their engine as well. Anyway, that wraps up Dracotail. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you all for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. If you're on mobile, hit that little hype button thing, because I don't know what it does. It might do something cool. I don't know how it affects the algorithm. If it does affect it a lot, that'd be really nice if you did that. If not, I don't, like I said, I don't really know what it does. But thank you any for watching. Hope you guys have all enjoyed. Get ready for your regionals, get ready for your locals, enjoy your YCS tournaments, have fun playing this game because it's the greatest game ever. We'll see y'all later. Have a good one.